hopping on. Love to, we like to kind of give an introduction. See, everyone watching hopefully knows who we are, what we do, and how we work with different companies. But, I'm not sure people watching on our end will necessarily be as familiar with you and your company. So, yeah, I'd love to hear the story, I guess. How'd you come up with the idea? What were you doing? What were the first couple I guess, years like?
So I'll just dive right into the origin story then. So Sergio, Adam, and I have all been friends since we were 14 years old, and their parents were making kombucha even before that period of time. So I ended up moving back into the Baltimore area after graduate school, and Sergio and Adam were already making kombucha and sharing it with friends and family in the area, as well as selling to some local students.
Was this kind of like a bathtub gin situation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe like one step above bathtub gin at that point. So we were really just kind of share, like when you make kombucha, you tend to have more product than you can consume yourself. So it was really just due to that, starting to share it with more people. Eventually, we had a couple stores ask for it. So we rented the side room of a juice shop, and it was about 200 square feet, tiny room. And that's really when Wild Bay was born. So rented that side
You were
room.
14?
Well, I'm saying when I moved back after grad school.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, wow, that's very impressive.
Yeah. So we've all known each other since we were 14, but it started when I was about 22.
Okay.
23. Yeah. So we rent that side room of juice shop, start making the product, kind of knocking on doors of local cafes, restaurants. Was very much still a part-time gig. About 6 months in, Whole Foods reached out to us to carry the product locally because they had tried it at some cafe. And that's when we really dove in full time and kind of went for it. So outgrew the entire juice shop in about a year, moved in a 3,000 square foot space, paid for that build out by winning some business competitions, things like that. Outgrew that space in 2 years, and then moved into our current spot in 2019, which is about 13,000 square feet in Northwest Baltimore. So now we make two products, our Wild Bay Kombucha and our Acaro Yerba Mate, but we also function as a full beverage distributor. So we are completely vertically integrated as a company, own the manufacturing, own the distribution. And so now our products can be found everywhere from, like I mentioned, Whole Foods, Mom's Organic, Harris Teeter. We sell directly to your Boston Red Sox, the Phillies, places like that as well.
So I have to ask, we work with a lot of technology companies, right? Because the theory is you put a couple guys with a computer in a living room and they can build a product that's sold over and over again. What was the biggest challenge that you ran into, I guess, as you started to scale? Because, it's not like software or even a services business where you can just kind of jump in and hopefully deliver. You have to build the product, you have to source ingredients, things like that. How difficult was that as you really started to scale?
So early on, obviously, your immediate hurdles like your licensing, your production, figuring out those pieces. Getting through that isn't too bad. But yeah, I think the path to market, I think, is probably the toughest thing for people in the consumer space, right? Because there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of products. How do you cut through that noise, get your product to shelf, and how do you make those logistics work in a way that is profitable and you can scale? So for us, that was definitely the steepest learning curve. Was what type of playbook actually works in this space versus what are 90% of people doing? Because most people, they will take a very similar mentality to what you described, right? Like, how can I do this as lean as possible? And in our space, that means you hire a third-party manufacturer,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're really just operating as the middleman, and you sell to the store.
Yeah.
The problem there is you're giving up a lot of margin, so there's not much for you to play with anymore, and there's not a lot of differentiation there. right? When an investor's looking at you, or a bank or a store, you're using the same large manufacturer the other brands trying to get onto your shelves are using.
Do you find, when you were going through that, margin aside, was quality a concern at all? Having being, if you were to outsource it?
Exactly, exactly, because kombucha is a pain in the ass to make. Like, that's just the
Yeah,
nature.
I haven't heard it's an easy thing to concoct.
Yeah, so for the most part, like co-packers or third-party manufacturers won't touch it, right? Because it's fermented, it's living and probiotic, and it takes weeks to make, right? Because that's ferment over the course of weeks, and most people aren't willing to let you occupy their tanks for that type of period of time. So for us, we really didn't have a choice, and that's kind of what led us down that path of
Does make
self.
the decision easy.
Yeah, exactly. But then when we released the yerba mate later and understood the industry much more, we were like, self-manufacturing clearly the way to go, especially once you've already sunk capital in a lot of the infrastructure.
How did you go about financing all that to get started? I'm assuming, obviously you and your friends scrounged together what you could from yourselves, family and friends, but talk me through that funding cycle that you had to go through.
Yeah, so 2015 when we started, we each threw in just 3K, so $9,000, and we're like, all right, we're subleasing this tiny room in this juice shop.
That's impressive for recent grad school grads to have 3K each.
Yeah, so then we were really just putting one foot in front of the other. So we were doing everything by hand from
Uh,
2015 until September 2017. So
okay.
because of that, there's not really too much cost, right? You're just repurchasing the materials you've already been using. Um, when we hit 2017, that's when we took our started diving into financing a bit more. So that's when we purchased an automated bottling line. So that's about $100,000 piece of equipment.
Mhm.
We utilized the Baltimore County, so just a county outside of Baltimore, has a fund where they pull funds from the the slot machines, the slot terminals. They have to donate
Oh,
a
no
certain
kidding.
percentage to the county that then reinvests it into local businesses. So we were able to
Interesting.
get a loan through them to purchase that piece of equipment. And we continue to really lean into like CDFIs and other community type lending opportunities like that, um, as we've scaled. And they've been tremendous, right? Because you form these meaningful partnerships with them, and you are providing them results that drive their incentives as well, right? Like their primary goal for, let's say, 90% of these community lenders is driving either job growth or economic growth in a specific area. So as
Yep.
long as you're growing and you're hiring, they're happy, and you can typically go back to the well.
Okay. Makes sense. When did you, so talk me through, has that been your primary fundraising? Has been those community lending solutions?
On the debt side, yes. So when we outgrew the 3,000 square foot space in 2019 and moved to our current space in 2019, which is 13,000 square feet, we paid for that build out by raising a friends and family round. So we raised $850,000 from local angels, friends, and family
Yep.
to pay for the build out of this space.
Okay. Nice. So, sitting here, 2024 at this point, you obviously scaled much more than you were when you got started. From a financing perspective over the next few years, every company can use more funds. Do you think you'll continue exploring the various debt options, or do you think you'll, kind of dive into the more equity based approaches as you see true opportunity to scale?
I think we will dive more into the equity-based opportunities, and the reasoning for that is really the use of capital, right? Because until this point, the majority of the debt we've brought on is tied directly to assets, right? Whether it's the equipment or the build out itself. Um, we have a lot of direct assets that tie into that versus now that we have the infrastructure, we've positioned ourselves as a distributor in this region, we're really more focused on growth and growth capital.
Yeah.
So taking on growth capital just makes more sense to take on as equity.
Yeah, I always tell companies that, obviously we focus on raising debt for companies, but, there are plenty of times when equity does make more sense.
Yeah.
Whether it is, focusing on non-asset based investments, but also if you truly see a huge opportunity to grow, right? Like if you have the opportunity to take on massive distribution agreements, but it's kind of coming at you all at once, and you need capital now and in great excess to
Yeah.
fund it. That's a lot different of a situation where debt obviously makes sense for more working capital purposes or asset based build outs, things like that.
Oh, definitely. Because I mean, I see that completely separately. Because I see
Yeah.
that as you're essentially almost financing a PO at that point. If you know you have a
Yeah.
contract and you're going to win it, you just need financing.
So what's the most exciting thing that to come out of the business this year? Whether it be a product, a new innovation or something or whatever it might be.
Ooh, that's a great question. There's been a couple things. I would say from a partnership standpoint, we have partnered with the U.S. Naval Academy,
Oh,
and
that's
that's a
cool.
pretty cool one. So we have a couple kegerators of kombucha, and the men are just flying through it. They love it. So that's been pretty exciting and a very different type of account for us. And then in terms of kind of the development side, we launched our distribution about 2 years ago, and in the first year, it grew by over 150%. The second year grew by over 100%, and this year we're expecting similar growth. So
Congratulations.
that's been really exciting, and we've achieved that and don't even have a website for the distribution arm yet. So it's good traction for sure. So that's definitely a really exciting piece for us, continuing to grow that outwards and see how far we can take it. And it kind of grows our brand symbiotically because we're filling these cafes with all of their beverages, but the ones we make are obviously highlighted by our salespeople.
What would you say? So I haven't asked founders this enough on videos like this, but I do like to always ask, what would be if you go back and day one, right? You're talking to yourself on day one. What's one thing that you'd say, hey, either do this differently or don't do this at all? What's one thing that you would have taught yourself?
So I'm a very mathematical person. So I think what I would need to tell myself is everything's going to cost you twice as much as you think, even if that's not what the math is telling you. You should, when you are fundraising, fundraise 30% more, 30, 40% more than you think you need.
Yeah.
Because that's definitely something that we've learned over time. One thing I wouldn't do, which we did in the past, is we partnered with like some local distributors to take our product to the stores because we're like, you know what, being completely vertically integrated is too much, and we just saw just a huge drop in sales and issues with like product quality and handling and so that's one thing I would definitely never do again, and now we obviously won't that we're running our own trucks.
So you came out of grad school and started the business. And you said you were 22, right?
Yeah, so that would have been when we started talking about it. I was 23. I was 24 when we started actually selling the product.
What were you doing as a full-time job at that point?
So I was doing some energy consulting work. So like working with
Okay.
large commercial buildings on their like energy usage, things like that. Because my master's was in environmental management with a focus in energy.
Okay. Well, because I remember someone asked. My partner John and I, we started the business. I was 23, and then John was 24.
Yeah.
And someone asked, I was like, "Oh, is there anything you do differently?" I'm like, "I probably would have got some professional experience first before diving into starting a services-based business that we did not realize is largely built on relationship development. Uh, but yeah, no, it's I always find it interesting when someone else starts something pretty much right out of school because it's not like you start an energy consulting business. You start something completely different,
Yeah.
and
But
yeah,
I think also though that naivety can be beneficial, right?
oh yeah,
You're fearless, right? Because like at that age, I was like, all right, what are my obligations? I have to keep like one succulent in my house alive, and and
that's one more than I've ever kept alive.
other than that, I can just go for it.
Yeah,
And I think being able to dive in like that is such an advantage versus now, I have a wife and I have a young baby at home. Like I couldn't
yeah.
take the same type of risks or dedicate the same type of time.
Yeah, I heard a quote once. It was like you basically have to be a little insane, if not stupid, to start your own business.
Yeah,
So it's better to do it young when you can, excuse any stupidity a lot more than when you have a lot of responsibilities at home.
exactly. Exactly.
So what's on the horizon for Wild Bay? What do we have to look out for?
So continuing to grow outwards in concentric circles. So we're planning on hitting the Philadelphia market, which is pretty exciting. We are innovating our packaging a bit. I can't talk too much about that, but currently we're in glass bottles. We'll no longer be in glass bottles, and we'll be bringing the product to market in a packaging that you've probably never seen kombucha in before.
Okay, that'll be cool.
Yeah.
One question I completely overlooked bringing up, just given it's a topic every day in my line of work. You know, the past I guess 18 months haven't. Depends on what metrics you read, right? In some ways, the economy seems to be doing extremely well. In some ways, it's been challenged. But have you? What kind of noticeable trends and differences have you seen, even just in 2024 compared to the previous couple of years?
I would say in 2024, people are a bit more weary. It seems like
When you
it
say people, just to clarify, you're talking about your customers or the end consumer?
So when I'm saying people, I guess what I mean is people within our industry. So like
Gotcha.
other founders, people like that. It seems like there is a little bit of fear, right? A lot of people who, especially who have to be on a fundraising type cycle,
Yeah.
are seem a bit worried, right, at the ability to raise those funds. And I think the businesses that have built sustainable businesses are going to shine a little bit more and have the ability to stand out. I think it's a little bit odd that it took something like this or something cyclical to make people want to buy or invest in a good business, not just a good brand. Um,
I'm shocked every day about it, to be honest with you.
yeah,
we,
it's like,
yeah.
why didn't the business fundamentals matter 5 years ago? That's so odd.
Well, one thing I find interesting is, so like I mentioned, we deal with a lot of technology companies, and obviously the theory behind the attractiveness of technology is high margins. You can produce some strong recurring revenue and profitability, basically at the sacrifice of high growth. Um, the amount of companies I talked to early last year that basically were not sustainable businesses without fundraising is very shocking to me. And then the companies I talk to now, they have great business economics. Their
Yeah,
unit economics are good. Their margins are good. Are they growing 60, 70% year over year? No, but they're still growing, at a healthy 20 to 30%. And they're
exactly.
doing so in at least a break even sort of way. But yeah, it is surprising how investors are just now focusing on, good businesses.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me though, especially within VC, right? Because the mentality in VC has shifted a little bit as well, and you're focused on more profitable businesses possibly. But the issue is the earlier side of VC needs to change also because
Yes.
if they're only growing by 20 to 30%, you can't expect the same 5 to 7 year life cycle to exit.
Yes, exactly.
And, and so like there has to be some shift at some point. I don't know whether it's like the pendulum swings back and they're just like, we want the companies growing by 400, 500% year over year, whatever happens, happens, or maybe the capital coming into them becomes more patient and allows them to, have 12 to 15 years for these more sustainable companies to scale and they see a higher batting average.
I will say I do not see capital getting patient in any circumstance. And it's funny. So, um, I have a friend that works at a tech company, and it kind of was similar there, where the VC came in, gave him a bunch of money, and this was about, I think, 18 months ago, and the company's been doing well, but they're just continuing to sit on a ton of cash. So they basically raised all that money for no reason. But they're good business economics. But now the VC is like, can you spend some of the money we gave you? You need to spend that to grow more aggressively. So I definitely hear a lot more conflicting views, I guess, from the investors and the founders and executives of these companies quite a bit.
Yeah, and tech's an interesting space as well, right? Because you're talking about businesses with great unit economics within tech, but there's this other narrative where it's almost like really sexy to be a company that's made $0 in tech that has a ton of users,
Yeah.
right? Just like how, it took Google or Facebook a really long time before they started to monetize.
Yeah.
Like people love that in tech.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because it's that double-edged sword. Versus for us in consumer, at least it's a little more straightforward because it's always been at least a revenue-driven business. Now it's just also a profit-driven business.
One thing I'm curious about, your view on keeping the consumer happy. Whether it's tech or the consumer goods companies we do work with, the number one topic is how they continuously keep the consumer satisfied, because consumers are notoriously fickle customers.
Yeah.
How do you keep them happy? I don't know the beverage space that well, because I know sometimes consumers can get bored, but also I don't know if you're in a space where consistency is key. How do you keep them continually buying your stuff at Whole Foods and the other places that you're in?
So kombucha is a very habitual product, right? People who drink kombucha tend to drink it, 3 to 4 times a week. So not as habitual as coffee, but up there.
Yeah.
So consistency is absolutely huge. Like making sure you're producing an extremely high quality product that person's going to enjoy every single time. The other piece is not compromising on the ingredients or the quality, because the consumers who buy health foods or natural foods in general, they read ingredient panels, and if you're mixing those things up or you don't have the certifications they like, you're going to take a hit, right? So like we are USDA organic, we're Star K kosher, our products are vegan. So just making sure you meet the consumer where they are. And then we also do try to keep it fresh by releasing new flavors, and whether it's a seasonal or a temporary limited time release, you keep things exciting for them and give them the ability to keep discovering your brand in a different way.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, look, I appreciate you hopping on here. Any final words for the viewers?
I mean, just
Bye, Wild Bay.
yeah, Buy Wild Bay and just keep pushing out there. I mean, I think if you've been around long enough as an entrepreneur, you know that this mentality or this state of the economy or market, however you want to look at it, is cyclical. So if you're able to be patient and trudge through if that's what's going on with you, or thrive during this time, that there's going to be changes to the climate and you'll have the opportunity to capitalize on those when it comes.
Excellent. Well, look, thanks for coming on. It was very nice to talk with you.
You too. Take care.
All right. See ya.
Bye.